From the Arizona Daily Star and Tucson.com, this is the Wildcast.
You're listening to another episode of the Wildcast podcast. I'm your host, Justin Spears, here with Michael Lev. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast wherever you get your podcasts. Arizona just coming off a big win over Oregon State, 27-24. Now the Wildcats got UCLA coming up, number 20 ranked Bruins. This is the fifth straight game against a top 20 opponent for the Arizona Wildcats. So a tough stretch for Arizona, but Lev, Arizona 5-3, one step away from going to a bowl game after beating Oregon State. And I think it was just how they were able to do it, going up against a different style opponent. It was really a different team than the previous three teams that Arizona had faced. And I was wondering how they were going to stand up to the challenge. Defense, after that first drive, they were lights out. Offense, Noah Fifita, the kind of the big storyline here for Arizona football, the redshirt freshman quarterback who's filled in for Jaden DeLora, has really been a breath of fresh air for the offense. And then special teams got going again. I know that the 38-point win over Washington State was as dominant as it gets, Lev, but like when you think about all three components of the game, heck, Tyler Loop had a 51-yard field goal, which, hey, you look at the score, was a deciding factor. This was a very all-around game for Arizona.
I'm glad you brought that up because when I saw you tweet that, I was like, how can you say that after they just killed Washington State 44-6? But I get what you mean now.
Yeah.
You're talking about all three phases of the game, and it was very evident in the fourth quarter, right? Get a stop, get a great punt return, score a touchdown, get a stop, get a great punt return, score a touchdown. It happened 2 times in a row, and that swung the game from a 17-13 deficit to a 27-17 lead. You also said that this is a tough stretch, or they've been in the midst of a tough stretch. Here's the thing.
Yeah, they've looked good.
Arizona's a tough team. They are a tough out. They really are. And they are playing like one of the top 25 teams in the country, to be sure. Did I rank them in my top 25?
Do you really feel
that
way, Lev? Do you really feel that way?
I did not, because placing a team in the top 25 and whether a team is playing like a top 25 team are not necessarily the same thing. I had a long back and forth with several thoughtful and passionate fans on X/Twitter on Sunday about this because I knew people were going to notice it. Usually I'm arguing with fans of, UCF and
other time zones.
Other time zones, other conferences. But hey, the worlds are colliding here. Arizona is a topic of conversation nationally. I keep hearing them being brought up on these college football podcasts that I listen to, national ones, and Brett McMurphy gave him a little shout out on
Herb Street was
Twitter.
raving about
Herb
them.
Street, yeah. So, real quick on this topic of the top 25, it's harder than you think. Okay, there's a lot of sort of like, people who, oh yeah, of course, yeah, you got to rank Arizona. Okay, well, fine. Do I also have to rank UCLA? If I rank Arizona, UCLA 6-2. With maybe their resume isn't quite as impressive. Do I have to rank USC? They're 7-2. They beat Arizona head to head. I didn't rank either one of them. Okay. If I did decide I'm going to put all those 3 teams in there. That means 3 teams have to come out.
Yeah.
Who are the 3 teams that come out? This week I added Kansas, which just beat Oklahoma, which was a top 10 team, right? Kansas State, which has the same record of 6-2 and has won its last 2 games like 85-6 or whatever. And Oklahoma State, which has the same 6-2 record and beat both of them.
Yeah.
Okay,
they're not quite there.
Other pollsters did not rank Oklahoma State. I don't do it that way. Usually, if teams have the same record, I will, and there's a head-to-head victory, then I put Oklahoma State ahead of Kansas and Kansas State for that reason. Now, I did change things up a little bit. Like, I put Texas ahead of Oklahoma based on the way that they're playing, even though there was a head-to-head. I really should have flopped Washington and Oregon.
Yeah.
Even though Washington beat Oregon, they look like maybe the best team in the country the last couple weeks. Maybe they should be ahead. But anyway, the point is, as I always say, like, these rankings do not take place in a vacuum. I'm not just evaluating Arizona. I'm evaluating everybody else and how they fit into the puzzle. If I put 3 Pac-12 teams in that I didn't rank, I got to take 3 teams out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's those Big 12 teams. Maybe it's, maybe it's James Madison, Fresno State, and whatever other G5 team that I give a look to and gave a little love to. So it's a little bit more complicated than simply Arizona deserves to be in there. I also, last point on this, I had to come up with a cutoff this time of year, and I decided there are no 3-loss teams that are going to get in. That could change next week.
Yeah.
And I will state this right now. This is my promise, my guarantee. If Arizona beats UCLA next week, I will rank them in the top 25.
Where?
I don't know yet. It depends on how things go with other teams and so forth. But I will repeat: if Arizona defeats UCLA this week to go to 6-3, I will rank Arizona in the top 25.
Well, I think also too, from other voters' perspectives, they're going to look at this game and say, if Arizona beats UCLA, and go like, okay, well let's look at their resume. They've won 3 games in a row, and all of them are against top 20 opponents, including a number 11 ranked Oregon State team, which is really good under Jonathan Smith, and they have such a unique brand. It's really such a fun team. I think that was a great win on Saturday for Arizona, and so I think other voters would follow suit. And I think most definitely, if Arizona wins on Saturday against UCLA, they're in the top 25, which hasn't happened since. Ooh man, were they ever ranked under Kevin Sumlin?
Did they sneak in there in 2019
when they started 4-1?
I'll look this up while we're talking. Yeah, when they were 4-1.
Well, they certainly didn't in the years after that. After
No,
the 2019 season.
No, they did not.
So it's been a few years.
Yeah. One other point on this, and this is a good point that someone brought up, that like as a West Coast person, there's just sort of an obligation in a way to kind of be the eyes and ears for the rest of the country when it comes to these late games. A lot of the voters probably go to sleep and they probably just look at the box score the next day. They're not staying up to watch Arizona. So I take all of that under consideration. I take it all very seriously. I try to eliminate all biases. I also try to avoid, judging strictly on the eye test, right? Because I watch Arizona games way more closely than I do every other game.
Yeah.
Even if I'm sitting down to watch a game on TV, I'm not watching it as close. I'm not taking notes as I do in the Arizona game. So the eye test, I feel like it's not an apples to apples comparison when I'm looking at Arizona. So I have to sort of pull back in a way. The last time that Arizona was ranked, Justin, was 2017.
Wow.
They got to as high as 23rd in the AP poll and 22nd in the CFP poll.
The Khalil Tate year.
Yeah, I think they could sneak into the CFP poll, which comes out for the first time Tuesday night.
Mm-hmm. ESPN?
ESPN.
Doing a special?
Yeah. So, we actually have to pay attention to that.
That's crazy,
for the first time in a really long time.
Wow. You mentioned earlier James Madison. One of my favorite storylines of the year, James Madison, former Arizona quarterback Jordan McLeod and company. They're really good.
Sort of writing about that for today a little bit. So I'm going to touch on that in a way that you'll have to see.
And Rich Rod and Jacksonville State.
Yep. I'm looking at some paragraphs that I just wrote before you came in here, and they're both featured in there. So
Weekday Warriors.
Right?
We like because they're Conference USA, so they play on Tuesday, Wednesday.
Conference USA, they did the MAC thing to get some exposure. I mean, I don't know how great it is for like the well-being of the student athletes, but it's a lot more eyeballs.
Absolutely,
people are talking about those games because they're the only games that are on for college football junkies. And
yet, James Madison and Jacksonville State can't make a bowl game. Nope. First year playing at the FBS level.
Nope. I think James Madison's second year, but it's a 2-year.
Oh, it's a 2-year.
It's like a 2-year transition period. So it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make sense. We need these guys to play. These two teams to play, and then you have Arizona ties on both sides.
Yeah. So I was thinking more about the Arizona-Oregon State game, and I think during the week someone had brought up the comparison to North Dakota State, just in terms of the Beavers' style of play. And I thought the game actually kind of played out similarly to that game against North Dakota State. They were both 3-point games.
Oh,
they were both kind of grind. There was like games where you just had to kind of grind it out. Not a lot of mistakes on either side. Good 4 minutes ish style offense from Arizona there in the fourth quarter. Now Oregon State did make some mistakes, and Arizona did too. I would say Oregon State's biggest mistake by far was the decision at the end of the first half to try for a fake field goal, and Jonathan Smith fell on the sword for that one. Right afterward, he was like, "That was my bad. Shouldn't have done that." And then Arizona did have one interception. What sort of looked like a miscommunication, but I was just really impressed with how, like I said, how they grinded it out. You know, I mean, this was not easy. This was not flashy. They've won a couple one-score games in Pac-12 play that, you know, they might have lost in recent seasons.
Well, I was also thinking about this. Is this where Jedd Fisch's NFL expertise comes into play? Because a lot of these games that are played in the NFL are like what we saw on Saturday night.
Yep.
That was not a boring game by any means, right? That was, some would say by college football standards, maybe a little low scoring, but it still was 27-24. It wasn't Big Ten. It wasn't, or Iowa offense, right? Like this was actually,
it was well played.
Two teams both playing very well, but yet it was a grinded out kind of game. And I just wondered, you know, how much of the NFL atmosphere or just play calling stuff that goes into it. I'm wondering, you know, that if that's something that plays into favor for Arizona because of Jedd Fisch and his background. But it was definitely a good win for Arizona. And you mentioned, you know, how the defense has really evolved, you know, under Johnny Nansen in year 2. The one thing that's really stood out to me about Arizona is their ability to just take the first punch and then kind of settle in and realize what we need to do, what Arizona needs to do. Because against Washington State, against Oregon State, both teams come out on opening drives and just move right down the field. And both times I thought, okay, here we go. It's going to be one of those type of games for Arizona. And then the rest of the way, it's just lights out. Arizona's given up 30 points in the last 2 games. 13 of them are on the first 2 drives. So think about that. 17 points across, 6 quarters of play. You're only giving up about 2-point-something points per quarter. You're going to take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday if you're Arizona. And so I'm really impressed by the defense, man. I think it's totally different now. Now, with that being said, can you keep replicating that? And if you're Arizona on offense, can you keep playing clean? Because guess what? You got a really good pass rush coming your way in UCLA. And to me, this seems like the over-the-hump game. We're going to get into like the mailbag questions here in just a little bit. But to me, Lev, you know, Arizona, I've been impressed with them so far. But to me, this is a really big test for them against UCLA. It seems like an over-the-hump game.
It does, in the sense that UCLA presents some. Again, we talked last week about how there's different challenges that Oregon State presented. UCLA presents a different challenge. And what that is a fierce pass rush and an absolutely excellent defense. You know, they are the top-rated pass rush team in the country, according to PFF. Mm-hmm. Okay. They have Leatu Latu, who I think he's sort of heading toward he might be a top 10 pick in the draft. Someone who people thought his career might be over because he had some injury issues. He transferred. I mean, he has 41 quarterback pressures this year, and the Murphy twins each have 40.
Wow.
All right. I will add to that the fact that Jonas Savanaya had kind of a rough game in pass pro. His run blocking was fine. His pass pro, it was not the best. He's played a lot of clean games during his career, and he's had a couple issues the last couple games. And you know what? He's still a pretty young player.
Yeah, he's
still learning. I'll be interested to see what Brennan Carroll has to say about that, what Jedd Fisch has to say, but. Hey, man, another huge challenge. I bet you there will be a lot of scouts at this game, too, to watch the Murphy twins and Leatu Latu go against Jordan Morgan on the other side as well. But Jedd might have to make some adjustments. He might have to leave a running back in or a tight end to chip these defensive ends, unless he just really, truly trusts his tackles to be like, okay, you guys, you got this. That can disrupt a pass game. They give up 4 sacks this past week. That was the most they've given up all season. So I'm a little concerned about that going into this UCLA game.
I think this could be a big game for Roberto Miranda, who's been kind of used as like a
shout out for Das Gronk.
Das Gronk. Well, he's been used in a lot of run packages this year, and so maybe adding a guy like him out there, go double tight end with him and Tanner McLaughlin. Maybe that's the move for Arizona, because I think in terms of like run blocking or chip blocking, like you said, I think maybe Roberto Miranda is a little bit more skilled in that department than the other tight ends.
Maybe, when Michael Wiley goes out into the flat, he gets a little chunk of Leatu Latu first.
Yeah.
Give him a little shoulder shot and then flare out. How about Michael Wiley, by the way? The impact that he was able to have without running the ball effectively at all.
Yep.
As a receiver. I mean, he is a great of what we used to call like third down back. Whether he's playing on third down or not, he is a great third down back. He is an absolute true weapon as a receiver, and that adds another dimension to their offense. Look, Jonah Coleman's a good receiver too. Wiley's he's longer, he's different. He kind of looks like he could be a wide receiver based on the way he's built. That was a huge addition. I think one we kind of maybe underestimated a little bit.
Yeah,
because Jonah had been playing so well,
and you're wondering how is he going to fit.
He's going to fit in just fine.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the mailbag. Thanks to all who submitted over the weekend. Got plenty here. Let's first start off with Luke Ornelas. Luke asks, if Noah Fifita starts from day one, is he in the Heisman conversation? And what is Arizona's record if so?
Okay,
That's tough.
It's a good question. I don't think he's in the Heisman conversation because, you're not going to bypass Bo Nix or, Jaden Daniels is playing unbelievably well for LSU. Marvin Harrison, Michael Penix, Caleb Williams. No, I don't think that's going to happen. But I do think they'd be 6-2 right now instead of 5-3 because I think they would have won the Mississippi State game. That's the one game to me that the outcome would have changed if he had played. Because the other quarterback, Jaden Delora, threw 4 picks in that game.
3 in the first quarter.
Yeah.
So I think that is the biggest what-if game of the year. It's kind of like the Cal game from a year ago when Arizona gave up so many rushing yards to Jaden Ott. So, the Mississippi State game, I think if Noah Fifita was able to play, because he's just a clean quarterback and very cool and poised. And I don't know if you've pointed this out, Lev. I think maybe you wrote about this, talking about like Jedd Fisch's composure on the sideline.
I did mention it, yeah.
And how it just kind of it's infectious, and everyone just kind of falls into that mindset, and you don't really see too many people thrown off or unhinged like we have seen in previous Arizona head coaches. Maybe not so much. Kevin Sumlin. Kevin Sumlin was he was kind
of the other
coach,
end, maybe
maybe a little too cool.
A little too much.
Yeah, too cool to the point where it seemed like he almost didn't care. Jedd Fisch cares, but he's also very cool and collected, and that's exactly how Noah Fifita is, and it trickles down, and now you're seeing. Jaden Delora is a good quarterback, right? But the way Noah is and how Jedd Fisch is, it just seems like a perfect fit. And everyone else is buying into it and just kind of rallying around this kid.
They're both very professional.
Yeah.
Very buttoned up. And we've mentioned this before, but Arizona's built its roster up. You don't need someone to be playing hero ball most of the time for them to be effective. You just go out and execute the offense. And I think that's proved to be a really effective tandem, Jedd and Noah.
Yeah. Noah Fifita, since taking over as QB1, ever since that Stanford game, 75% completion rate.
Is that good?
It's pretty good. Nearly 1,200 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And, some of these games, a couple of them, he didn't have any passing touchdowns. So, he could have better touchdown numbers, but he's been very, very clean. So, Noah Fifita is not going to be in the Heisman conversation, but I think Arizona has certainly one more win on their resume. And maybe if they go for 2 in that first overtime, who knows? I mean, we could really be talking about Arizona with only 1 loss this year. It's crazy. Okay, moving on to the next one. Let's get ahead of ourselves. U of A wins out. SC loses 2 more times. And Oregon loses to Oregon State. Tiebreaker? Who wins rematch for Pac-12 title? UW versus U of A? Nice to think about, right? Seriously, UCLA D-line is great. Will O-line protect Fifita well or create holes for running backs? So
we just addressed the second part of that regarding the matchup between the offensive line and defensive line. The first part, I mean, there are a lot of scenarios that are still on the table in the Pac-12. And they're still alive. They're in that mix. And I got to tell you, Justin, looking at the remainder of the schedule, they could win every game. They could also go 2-2.
Yeah.
Hey,
they're
UCLA's
right there.
Playing
good too.
UCLA's playing well, but they also
ASU, excuse me.
No, ASU is, yeah. So it's not that crazy to think. No. You know, we've seen a lot of crazy things happen in this conference. Usually, this conference kind of eats its own. You know, it's in the big picture, if that even matters anymore with the conference dissolving. You know, it's better if someone gets through with only 1 loss. I think a 1-loss Oregon or Washington would most definitely make the college football playoff this year. Arizona does not face Oregon this year, so they can't have any direct impact on what happens with the Ducks. I think, based on what I've seen, the Ducks look like the best team in the league. Right now, they look better than Washington, even though they lost to Washington. Since that game, I mean, Washington barely beat ASU and barely beat Stanford.
Oregon's also really good at stealing Arizona's recruits, too.
Oh, are they? Did that happen?
5-star edge rusher Elijah Rushing going to Oregon.
Yeah, that was definitely the expected outcome.
Yeah.
In that situation, Tosh Lupoy had been down here. I heard Dan Lanning made a stop down here to personally come in and see the coaches at Sal Point. This is what we all thought was going to happen as soon as Elijah Rushing decommitted.
Yeah.
The good news is, I guess, if you're an Arizona fan, is they're going to be off doing their own thing in their own conference. You're not really losing this player to a conference rival anymore as of as of the end of this season.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So I don't know if there are any Big 10, Big 12 bowl tie-ins where they could end up facing each other at some point in time. That would be about the only way that Arizona would face Oregon again, which is a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
By the way.
You got any questions?
I do.
Okay.
I do. All right. This one is from Patrick Stark, who's definitely one of my better followers. Very thoughtful. I know you guys talked briefly about the chances Jed could leave for another job, but how worried should we be about assistant coaches being poached? I would love to keep the staff intact for a couple of years.
Johnny.
Yeah, that is always a looming threat because, the truth is other schools can pay more money than Arizona can. I mean, they've tried really hard under Dave Hickey and since Jed came in to be competitive in those areas, but if LSU wanted Kevin Cummings, the wide receivers coach, I'm sure they could at least double his salary and maybe more. So that is always a looming danger. I think Kevin Cummings is one that we've talked about before, always being a threat to leave. Not that he wants to, but just because he's a really good young coach, a good recruiter, good on-field coach. He's the type of guy you want to have on your staff. Johnny Nansen, his stock has risen a lot this year. I don't know if he's done it long enough. I saw people speculating that USC was going to go after him, but I just don't think he's a big enough name.
Really?
No.
Man.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Maybe that's what USC wants. Maybe Lincoln Riley's like, you know what? Rather than going for this big name guy like Alex Grinch, who's been this established product here in college football, let me go out and get this guy who could really turn things around. And Johnny Nansen, I mean, look at the talent that he's brought in and also the guys that he's developed. And a big part of it, too, is like the position coaches that he has under him, too. I think Jason Kafusi is a big-time addition for Arizona. All the other position coaches, I think the work that John Richardson, I almost call him Jason Richardson, John Richardson has done with the cornerbacks, I think is very good too. So the position coaches are great, but man, what Johnny Nansen has done with his defense and also the different schemes and formations. I mean,
I'm
listen,
not saying,
if I'm
I'm not
USC,
saying,
I'm looking at Johnny Manziel.
I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it. I just know what USC's general MO is, and it's usually to go after some kind of a big name.
Yeah.
Big name guy. I don't know who that is, but I could see them doing that. All right, this one is from Senor Huevito. It's a frequent poser of questions to us. If Noah Fifita starts the rest of the season, what do you think JDL will do in the offseason? What are the current NCAA rules for athletes that have already transferred once? Would JDL's off-field issues affect his decision or possibly even limit his opportunities elsewhere? I think if Noah Fifita remains the starter, that Jayden de Laura is going to transfer. But he would have to graduate in order to play immediately next season at another FBS school.
I think he will.
We do not know the status of his academics.
Because this is his fourth year.
It is. Yeah. It is. And sometimes, too, he might not be able to go until after the spring semester, which kind of sometimes creates an awkward situation, makes it a little more challenging. Remember Jordan McLeod, you mentioned earlier, he couldn't come in the spring that year, and that really hurt him in that QB battle against Will Plummer and Gunnar Cruz. What do you think about the off-field part? Do you think that would dissuade anyone?
I don't know. I really don't, because you're going to talk to his lawyers. You're going to do your due diligence. Because, Jayden de Laura is a really good talent to where you just can't simply ignore him. You can't look at what's going on right now and say, okay, whatever. We just don't want to deal with it. Maybe some teams are like that. But also, I think Jayden de Laura is a good enough player to where teams are going to really, really do their due diligence. And they're going to look into it, and they're going to make sure that they turn over every single stone to ensure that they are totally okay with bringing in Jayden de Laura. Obviously, Arizona has stood by Jayden de Laura's side during this whole process. And I think they'll do the same. Because let's be real here. It's not like Jayden de Laura in Arizona, they have a sour ending, right? This is not, Jayden de Laura getting just benched because he was playing just so bad and things didn't end so well. I think Arizona is going to do whatever they can to help out Jayden de Laura and make sure that he's in a right position.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit on the drive in. Like, this whole change has happened kind of organically. I know there was an injury that prompted it, but it's not like Jed came out at any point and said Noah Fifita is our starter. And I don't think when we talk to him today that anyone's even going to ask that question anymore, because it just happened. It happened. Noah is the guy. And when that happens, the other quarterback, if he's a starting caliber player, generally does end up transferring. We've seen it. JT Daniels is on how many schools now? Keaton Slovis, I think, is on his third school. It's not uncommon, and I think it's just going to depend on A, his academic standing, and B, what's the right fit for him. I've heard people talk about Hawaii
Go back home.
as a possibility of going back home. That program needs help, to say the least. All right, so here's a good one. This is from Cat Bus AZ. What is the greatest position of need for recruiting / transfer portal next season? And then he also asks, Arizona is plus 12,500 to win the Pac-12 title game at Caesars, worth a flyer. I'm like, the second part, yes, worth a flyer. Plunk down your $10. You never know what's going to happen. What do you think are some of the biggest positions of need, whether it's the transfer portal and recruiting? And I think those are two different things, by the way, generally speaking.
Yeah. Well, look at what you're losing for sure after this season. You're losing your starting left tackle. Are you okay with moving Raymond Polito out to left tackle or moving Jonas Avinea out to left tackle? I think one of those guys is going to be starting at left tackle next season for Arizona. We don't know which one. That's just my hunch. I don't really, this is not sourced by any means, but I'm just, looking at the plan for Jonas Avinea, having him come in at right guard and moving him out to tackle. And that's actually one of our other questions. The dude 1121 says, does the staff see Polito as a tackle and as Jonah better at tackle or guard? I think they're both tackles. And I think that's where they're both going to end up at. And I think that's how they're both going to get drafted and go into the NFL. But Raymond Polito, his health has been inconsistent this year. With the bicycle accident, also with the ankle injury, he's a really good talent when he's healthy, and he's going to be a force when he's available for Arizona. But you also want to be able to, make sure that you have that depth. Because when he went down, Leif Magnuson then stepped in, and he's proven to be a decent right guard for Arizona.
They also had some pretty high level recruits in
Rhino,
this last class.
Rhino and Elijah.
Yeah,
Payne.
who are potential future tackles.
Yeah.
The thing about that position, when those guys go in the portal, like every school in the country wants them. And there's so few and far between. So that's tough. You're going to lose your Michael Wiley, right?
Yeah.
And DJ Williams, but they have 2 running backs coming in.
They're really good.
So I don't think we're both really good. So I don't think they're going to go there. They're losing Tanner McLaughlin at tight end, I believe. I don't think he has any more eligibility. If he does, it's probably time for him to go pro regardless. But they have guys in the pipeline that they really like. Dorian Thomas got a shout out recently. I think Kean Burnett, big spring, big year for him next year. I think defensive line is an area because they brought in a lot of veterans. And Bill Norton, I think, technically does have another year of eligibility if he wants to use it, but I don't know how many of those guys are going to be back. And those guys have made a huge, huge difference for them. So even though they have guys coming up, I think they'd still want to supplement there a little bit.
That's the thing about Arizona is they're so young. They only have a few holes to plug after this year. They're a program that's on the rise, yet they have so much potential for next year.
Yeah, it's because they've had two good recruiting classes in a row, right? And when we think they're tracking toward a third, even though they did lose Elijah Rushing and Keona Wilhite along the way, I'm sure they have Plan B and Plan C ready for those defensive line spots. But I don't know. I would just always focus on both lines.
Yeah.
Every single year, that's where these games are won. That's the biggest difference with this year's team.
No doubt.
Right? I mean, they're good against the run. And they're not getting pushed around on the offensive end either. All right, I got one more for you. This is from AZ Cats Go. Which players are most likely to get poached this offseason? We feel like Dorian Singer got poached.
Yep.
Right? I don't know about if anyone else got poached, quote unquote. And you never know what the real reasons are that someone leaves, but I could see someone like Speedy Luke transferring. I have no information about this, okay? I'm not reporting this. This is just speculation based on the fact that he hasn't gotten consistent playing time here.
Yeah.
And even next year we talked about Wiley and Williams leaving, but Adam Muhammad and Jordan Washington are coming in, right?
And they still have Brandon Williams too.
Brandon
Johnson, sorry.
And they still have a guy by the name of Jonah Coleman coming back next year too, who he's going to be the number 1 running back, right? So that is a player that I could see leaving. I could see A.J. Jones transferring. Just hasn't gotten a lot of playing time at wide receiver. Other guys have kind of snuck in there a little bit. Kevin Green and Malachi Riley have kind of moved up a little bit and maybe surpassed him a little. And, hey, guys want to play.
Yeah.
I wrote this story for our special section that's coming out in basketball about women's basketball team, roster construction, how few players they have this year, that they're going to have to play freshmen. But Adia Barnes wanted to do that all along. And she said, in her opinion, that 90% of the time, the reason players transfer is because they just want to play more.
Man,
So you look at this year's team, who are some of the, those highly rated guys who haven't played.
Well,
that's 2. Sterling Lane,
yeah,
I would say, is another one. Just he hasn't gotten on the field. Maybe he needs a change of scenery to get his career going.
Yeah. And also A.J. Jones is kind of the backup to T-Mac. And now you're getting another year of T-Mac.
Yep. Same position.
Do you really want to do that and just wait it out until T-Mac leaves? Kids nowadays are a little impatient. And also I don't fault them for
No, I don't either.
Hey, I want to play right away. I need to go to a place
if
where
A.J. Jones transferred, I think nobody would blame him.
Yeah.
Because he hasn't gotten a chance to play.
Yeah.
And that's what everybody wants to do. I think the same with Speedy. He looked really good in that Washington State game. And then he got, 2 touches?
Yeah.
Maybe 3 against Oregon State. They just had a hard time figuring out what to do with him. They did use him on motion a little bit more, like the jet sweeps, that kind of thing. I think there are ways to do it, but you also have a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah.
You know?
Speaking of a lot of mouths to feed,
Yeah.
Loudon Montoya says, does Montana Lamonia's Craig lack of production worry you at all? I wouldn't say worry because you're getting a lot of production out of the other guys. The Jacob Cowlings and T-Maxer is playing so well.
I know.
It's like you can go without. I mean, imagine if they had Dorian Singer. I think they would be.
They would feed him more.
They would have a lot of touches.
They would feed Dorian Singer more if he was here. It doesn't. I agree with you. It doesn't worry me. I think it's a mild disappointment to be sure that they haven't figured out a way to integrate him into the offense. But again, it's like they got a lot of dudes.
Yeah.
You know,
Running
like
backs too.
Tanner McLaughlin's going to get his 3 or 4 catches a game. You know, T-Mac and Jacob Cowling are going to combine for about 20 targets every game. Those are your top 2 guys. They have 3 running backs who are all going to get like 8 to 10 touches a game. Like, you just kind of run out at some point. And Montana, as best I can tell, he continues to play hard, and he's a really good blocker, and he's a physical player. I would love to see him get the ball a little more. And not always down the field stuff either. He seems like he's a good runner after the catch.
Yeah.
So give him one of those bubble screens instead of giving it to somebody else.
Yeah, Jacob Cowling can block for once.
Yeah, right. T-Mac has actually improved a lot as a blocker.
He has
this year. So yeah, that's been something that they're,
What goes back to Kevin Cummings being a great position coach.
Yeah, we've talked about TWP on our podcast, right?
Turnover worthy plays.
We've talked about TTT, right? Time to throw. How about ADOT? Average depth of target, right? Jaden Delora's average depth of target coming into this season for his career was around 10 yards or so. Okay. This year for Jaden, I think it's around 7 yards or so. And I'm going to look up Noah's ADOT here in a second. I think it's even lower. Like, I think it's maybe under 7 yards. Mm-hmm. So I wonder what that's about. We haven't asked Jed specifically about it. I think it's a good topic to bring up.
Well, because Noah even said after the game that there hasn't been a change in play calling. Everything has been the same. Maybe one quarterback's just looking closer. But I mean,
they're both lower than. I mean, Jaden. Like I said, Jaden is down. His ADOT is at okay, hold on. For the season, I'm looking at the wrong thing here. 7.1. Last year it was 10. Okay, so that's a 3-yard difference, right? I mean, that's pretty significant. And then Noah's ADOT is 6.4. So like I said, I don't know if that's game plan, if that's intentional, if that's to throw into the running backs more, the way that teams are defending them, not having Dorian Singer, who is kind of a downfield threat, and then maybe you've kind of changed the distribution of the targets a little bit. Jacob Cowling's ADOT is really low.
Yeah.
Like, they don't throw it downfield to him very often.
They just get the ball into the playmaker's hands and get out there and make a play.
Yeah, they do.
All right, so I'm kind of combining these.
Yeah.
This one comes from Brad Malone and also Kyle Morris. Kyle Morris asked, out of the Big 12 teams of next year, how would Arizona rank among them? Also, is Arizona as good as they look? Or Pac-12 maybe a little worse than what everyone thought? Then Brad Malone asked, is this really happening? Is Arizona legit? I want to believe, but we've been down this road so many times. This feels different, though, like it's just the beginning of something great. I want to believe. Help me believe. And that's why I say, Lev, this is
this game. Yeah.
This is the get over the hump game, because it kind of reminds me of 2015 when Arizona had a college game day in town.
UCLA was the opponent, right?
UCLA was that opponent. And it was a sold-out Arizona stadium. There was just like a buzz. And then Arizona gets waxed by UCLA. If Arizona loses to, I don't think they're going to get killed by UCLA. This is the difference between this year's team and previous regimes, and also last year's and the first year under Jedd Fisch. They don't get tossed around. Like they go out there and they compete and they take it all the way down to the wire. And that's why, like, if you're an Arizona fan and you're wondering, like, is it worth it to go out to a football game? Absolutely. I think going to a game is worth it because it's going to be a close game no matter what. Whether Arizona wins or loses, that's obviously that will be determined, but it's always going to be a close game. I think this game will be that case, but if Arizona loses, that's going to feel a little deflating considering there's so much momentum with this team right now.
You compared the Mississippi State game to the Cal game earlier in the podcast as sort of those missed opportunities, right? What's the difference between the two, though? They got blown out of Cal. I think that score was like 49-31 or 49-28. They lost by one score despite 5 turnovers at Mississippi State and easily, like an inch away from getting a first down and maybe having a chance to win that game. So, no, I think they are for real.
Yeah.
And I think it shows up in the run defense, the line play. I think the Pac-12 is really good, really deep, and they're doing well against good competition. So regarding the Big 12, very interesting if you look at the standings. Very sneakily, there are 5 teams in the Big 12 that are 4-1 in conference play. Okay, Oklahoma and Texas, I think we all know about them. Also Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and very, very quietly, Iowa State is also 4-1. 3 of the teams that came over from G5 conferences, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati, are a combined 1-14 in Big 12 play. Remember when Utah and Colorado first came over? It was tough. It was like hard for them. Utah wasn't a dominant force at first. Arizona kind of pretty regularly would whip them. Mm-hmm. So it takes a little time to build up the depth, and you kind of have different competitors for recruits. Now, obviously, Oklahoma and Texas are leaving. You're bringing Colorado, Utah, and Arizona State with you. I think going into next year that 3 of those teams might be inside the top 5 in the league. Arizona, Utah, and Colorado, if they have another good year of recruiting based on what they've done. I mean, heck, man, Cam Rising might be back next year for Utah. Isn't that crazy? But I think, with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, I mean, those are the superpowers, right? So I think it's a good league. I think there's going to be a lot of parity. But I think it's going to be kind of more winnable than the Pac-12 has been.
No doubt.
That's my take. I mean, what do you think about the Big 12?
Oklahoma State is going to be a really good team. But, again, they're consistently a top 15 team. They're not world beaters.
Right.
You're not joining a conference that has Alabama and Georgia and all these other incredible teams. It's a reachable opponent. And if that's the gold standard for Arizona, then why can't you become the standard? I mean, why can't Utah go in and be the standard? So I think Arizona, no matter what, is going into a position to where they can compete at all sports. And that includes the moneymaker, which is football. All right, so that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and comment. The Wildcast.
We'll be back. We'll be back on Thursday for our Pac-12 Pick'ems.
Oh, man.
Justin, you gotta do some research between now and then, buddy.
Yeah, I gotta get right. All right, we'll see you then.